Hello there, and welcome to this webinar. So my name is Muriel, and I will be hosting today's webinar, and I see already some people from the course that are there. So nice to see you, and some people who have already followed me. So it's really nice. Hi, Kat, Valérie, Elisabeth, Giuseppe. Yeah, and Pascal from her car, I see. So today we're going to talk about empowering hybrid teams, and we're going to go beyond the basics. So this is very nice and a very hot topic, of course. I already gave some webinars about this topic 1 and 2 years ago, but things have changed now. Since COVID, we are way further away. So I think it will be very interesting. So let me share my screen with you. You can ask questions in the chat, and and in the end, I will have a Q&A to answer your questions as well. So let me share my screen with you. Yeah, so you can see it. Yes, okay. So today, first maybe a little bit about myself. A lot of you know me, but some of you don't know me yet. So I wanted to present myself a little bit. So my name is Muriel. I'm the mother of 2 teenage boys, Max and Luca. I'm also, let me go here. Yeah. I also created Key Leader, a company where we help leaders build meaningful lives and organizations, and we try to get everyone into the middle of impact, meaning, and balance. I'm also an academic director at Solvay Brussels School for 2 programs, Leading Authentically in Digital Times and Leading Through Empowerment, a podcast host. So if you would like to know more about this and other topics, you can follow me on all the podcast platforms. I love to travel. This was me in Costa Rica doing a yoga retreat. And I used to be the CEO of Plantain that I transformed. And a lot of my learnings came from there originally. So today I'm going to talk about how the world evolved and the consequences it has on people and on teams. And then we're going to dive a little bit more deeper into specifically the hybrid way of working. Then I'm going to share the 3 steps to build a high-performing hybrid team. How can you start? How can we help? And I'm going to answer your questions. So first, how the world of work has evolved. Before going into the hybrid setting, I wanted to share how the world has changed, because one of the big changes is that we now live in very fast times where we have way more opportunities and threats than before, where tasks are less delimited than they used to be. I often give the example of, making a brochure, you knew when it started and when it stopped. Today, when the work is less materialized and you make a website, the task is less delimited and you can work on it more and more. You can, in fact, work on it and never stop. We also get requests from many more channels than before, and many of our jobs have become very complex today. And then in the past, we had more limited work time, mostly on site in the office, while today we have this 24/7 connection, and hybrid work has become the norm. So for those of you who just joined, welcome. My name is Muriel, and we're going to talk about hybrid teams. So the consequences of these fast times is that there is an explosion of workloads, because everything that I presented here creates an increased workload. So there is an increased workload, an explosion of workloads, and it has become simply impossible to deliver everything that comes on our plates in our professional lives, but of course also even in our private lives. And then the problem is that we have been programmed for slower times. So this is Pavlov that has conditioned his dogs Well, unfortunately, you have been conditioned also for slower times. So I'm not going to dive very deep in this topic, because this is the topic for another webinar that you can follow as well if you want. But the thing is that you have been programmed to deliver everything, to relax only when work is finished, to control everything, not making any mistakes, to being rational, strong, to work hard, and to manage your time. That's how you are worthy. And if you don't do all these things, you can feel worthless or guilty or not professional, while this programming is not serving you anymore in these fast and busy times. And then that creates the fact that most of you have linked your core identity to delivering, to working hard, to being perfect, to being rational, strong, and to controlling everything. And if you don't do that, you feel very uncomfortable, you feel guilty. And so you keep working hard with these conditioning that worked very well in slower times, but will be counterproductive in today's fast times. And so as a result, you find yourself in this catch-22, where on one hand, you have an explosion of workload that is impossible to deliver. And on the other hand, you feel worthless, guilty, not professional if you don't deliver everything, or if you dare pausing while work isn't finished. And as a result, people run faster, work harder, and organizations don't adapt fast enough, because these habits are standing in the way also of having success in very fast and busy times. So just the first question, how recognizable is this for you? Is this very recognizable, a little, not really, not at all? Just let us know in the chat. Then secondly, hybrid work enhances the current challenges that you in your team might already face. So let's dive into hybrid work a little bit. What we now see in the statistics is that 80% of the people currently work hybrid or in remote work. And I'm talking, of course, about the functions that are remote capable. Only the remote capable jobs, of those ones, 80% are already hybrid and remote. This is from a Gallup study with more than 10,000 participants. And it's going to increase to 60 or 90, 60% hybrids, 34% remote. So it's going to keep increasing. And what comes out of that study also, there are big advantages from working in hybrid modes, because what the employees say is that it improves your work-life balance, you have a more efficient time of your efficient use of your time, less burnout and fatigue, more freedom, and employees claim higher productivity. And then the top 5 benefits for organizations, approximately the same: reduced burnout and fatigue, better retention of employees, greater productivity, a bigger talent pool because you can fish further away from your office, and improved employee value proposition. There are also big challenges with hybrid work. And so according to employees, the challenges are less access to some resources and equipment, less connected to the culture, decreased collaborations, impaired working relationships, and reduced cross-functional communication and collaboration. And according to managers and leaders, you have also disadvantages, which is less communication, less collaboration, a negative impact on culture, lower productivity, and decreased creativity and innovation. And there are 3 identified risks also with hybrid work, is that your network and relationship building decreases. You have less development and learning opportunities when you work from home, and also less recognition. So, and I call it also the engagement paradox of hybrid work, because on one hand, if you don't offer hybrid work, engagement decreases. People are not motivated. They want this flexibility. But on the other hand, with hybrid work, you have reduced relationships, reduced collaborations, and that erodes engagement as well. So it's a little bit difficult because if you don't do it, engagement decreases, but hybrid work also erodes engagement. And we're going to talk about what to do about that later, of course. And then there is really no clarity on the effects of hybrid work on impact or productivity. So I've done a lot of research, and you can find as many research that shows that it increases productivity than research that shows that it decreases impact and productivity. So there it seems that it doesn't really impact productivity in a positive way or in a negative way, unless, of course, you change your way of working. But just the simple fact of hybrid work doesn't really change its impact or productivity. So let us know also what you notice, what is your experience with hybrid work. So you can put it in the chat, and I can then read it now or later. I'm very curious. So what is your experience with hybrid work? Because there is no way around hybrid work. So the companies that think, okay, in my company, COVID is finished, so now everyone comes back to the office, they will have great difficulties to attract talent, to keep people engaged, and especially the young people. So the question about are we going to work hybrid or not is not a question anymore. You don't have a choice as a company. It's just a new way of working. Also, there is no way around adapting yourself to this fast and busy world. So the world is not going to slow down suddenly, and your workload is not going to decrease magically, unfortunately, because these trends that I shared in the beginning of the presentation will only keep increasing. So the question now, and that's why you came, what can you do then to build a high-performing hybrid team? And let me first share with you what most companies did. So what most companies have done so far is they have adopted virtual meetings and added chats. Some companies now have an additional chat system. A lot have developed a hybrid work policy, and many have reduced their office spaces. But for many companies, that's the extent of what has been done regarding hybrid work. And of course, it's not enough. And that's what we see now in how we're working. It's not efficient. It's not the best way to have an impact. It's really not enough to only do that to increase the performance of your hybrid teams. So what can you do then to increase performance of hybrid teams? First of all, because hybrid works amplifies existing challenges, and that the world was already transforming before this latest trend, we first have to think about teamwork separately, that whether it's hybrid or on-site. So we first need to redesign the way we work. And once we redesign the way we work, then we can think about hybrid strategies. And I'm saying this because if engagement was already low before the hybrid work, it will probably increase. If you had difficulties attracting talent before working in hybrid mode, it will even be more difficult. So you might need to do other things before just thinking about how to adapt to the hybrid way of working. And so for me, there is a 3-step approach to really building a high-performing team. And the first step is first the team members and the team leaders need to learn to thrive in fast and busy times, regardless whether they work at the office or at home. You first have to reprogram yourself for these fast and busy times. Once you are reprogrammed, then you can start increasing empowerment. And then once we are reprogrammed, increased empowerment, then you can adopt the hybrid strategies. And that's what we'll dive into now in the webinar. So let me read a little bit of the questions. I see that hybrid work is perfect for me. However, when going to the office to connect, I feel face-to-face connections remain limited, yet due to high workload, pushing everyone to focus on the workload itself. So Greta, what you describe is what a lot of people describe. So we go to the office and we are so busy that we don't take the time to talk to each other or to brainstorm. And that is why the first step is so important before adapting to the other steps. And I don't know if there are other comments that, yeah, so which question? So we work with a lot of millennials. They have only known the fast times. Yes, the millennials suffer as much from the fast times as we do, because unfortunately in school, you are still programmed in a way to be adapted for slow time. So in schools, they also have been taught to do everything that is requested from them, to only stop once work is finished, to not make any mistakes. So they might be more adapted on a technological point of view, but really the deep programming and the deep conditionings are not serving them neither. And then, yeah, communication clash between millennials and other employees. Yes, that's a very good topic. And I think we might do a separate webinar on millennials, because I believe that on one hand, we as leaders, as organizations, we need really to adapt to these fast and busy times. And once we do that, the millennials will be better integrated, but we also have a kind of responsibility where we will have to help those millennials who are not as resilient as we are, who are not as well equipped to communicate. They find it difficult to communicate by phone or verbally with people. And so we need to help them also in that. But that's the topic for another webinar. And then, yeah, so hybrid work is a great experience, but a challenge to measure objective performance. Yeah, and I'm going to talk about that also here. We're going to give you tools where you can measure performance as well in a hybrid setting. So thank you for that. Let's dive into the first topic. So this step into these 3-step plan, the first step is you need to build a team that thrives in fast and busy times, regardless of workplace. And that's what we forget something. It's not only the question, should we work from home or from the office? What should we do where? First of all, you have to build a team that thrives in fast and busy times. So again, I only have 1 hour here, so I can't go into detail about that. The only thing I'm going to share there is that teams that thrive in fast and busy times have 40% more impact, double their energy level or resilience, are 72% more motivated, and have also more meaning. They find their job more meaningful. Then also, when you are better adapted to fast and busy time, your workload drastically increases. The turnover, so people looking for another job, also decreases with 50%, and your stress will decrease. So a lot of us are very busy because we are still working in a way that worked very well in slower, more stable times, but not at all anymore in today's fast and very busy times. So what are the habits? I'm going to go over it very quickly because that's not the topic of this webinar, but it's really the first thing you need to transform if you want to adapt. And so in slow times, it was enough to deliver everything, meaning saying yes. But in fast times, you have to learn to focus first. You can't do it all. Remember the introduction? You can't do everything anymore. It has been impossible. So you first have to know what to focus on, and then you can deliver quality. In slow times, it was enough to work hard. Today, I truly believe that it has become counterproductive. You will have to regularly pause and slow down, like you're doing now, so which is great. You're pausing, slowing down to learn new skills, to be creative, to find root causes of a problem. And then you can start working smart instead of hard. But if you constantly work hard and never take a step back, it will be very difficult to adapt rapidly to this world. And you risk burning out. So it's about managing your energy before your time. Being strong, ego-driven, and rational isn't enough anymore. Today, it's about being conscious of what's happening inside you, having this growth mindset, being aware of the impact of your emotions on your thoughts and your actions. And that's when, once you are more aware of everything that is happening inside of you, then you can act with way more courage and way more strength and be more rational. And then it's not about just being action-oriented. It's first thinking, what do I want to achieve? What is my purpose? What are my values? And once I know what I want to achieve, then you can skillfully act. So this is the reprogramming that we need to do, but I'm really calling it a reprogramming because it goes against what you have learned from a very young age in school. And then once you are reprogrammed and your team is reprogrammed, then you can move to the next step. But before going there, I'm curious to know how adapted do you feel you are to the fast and very busy times? And let me give you a cue. If you're working really, really hard, if you're quite stressed, if you run all the time, that's a cue that you are not adapted. So how adapted are you? Very adapted, on my way to get there? Or are you still mainly programmed for slower times? So what do I see? Lots of A's and a couple of B's. Yeah, great. So great. But I see still a lot of people from my course are there. So nice to see that you feel that you are more adapted. Okay. So step 2, once the leader and the team has been reprogrammed for the fast and busy times, then you can start increasing empowerment within your team. And empowerment is not simply about giving more responsibility to your teams. But what we see is that empowered teams, there again, have 52% more impact than teams that aren't empowered. The team's atmosphere improves with 98%. And also, it is critical if you want agility, if you want to adapt rapidly to all the changes. If you want agility, the command and control structure is way too slow. You won't get there and you will probably fail at attracting talent, fail at having impact and being agile. Then also, what we see from our research is that empowered teams have a lower workload. It doesn't decrease as much as when you are adapted to the slow and fast times, but still it also decreases. You have 44% less stress and also 30% less meeting time. So once your team is empowered, you will need to spend less time in meeting also. So, but there are 4 criteria, and before sharing those, I just wanted to share that when I used to be a managing director, I decided to empower one team. Even before I was a managing director, there was one team I was responsible for, and I increased empowerment over the years, and it became a team that was almost self-managed, and they were 30% more profitable than the other teams of the organizations. And that was because they could solve their own issues way more rapidly or seize their opportunities way more rapidly. And that's despite being in a smaller market. So empowerment will increase also your bottom line. So what are the 4 success criteria for empowerment? And it's clarity, autonomy, psychological safety, and a reprogrammed leader. So the first thing is you need to have a purpose, a value. You need to have clear objectives. And especially in hybrid times, it has to be crystal clear what we want to achieve, what our processes are, and also how are we going to make decisions. So you need to have clarity on all that, because you're not simply empowering people for the sake of giving them more responsibility, but because you want to reach a goal. So the North Star has to be clear. Especially the what and the why needs to be clear. The how, that is what you leave to the people to decide how they're going to organize themselves to get there. Then you need autonomy. And autonomy is having the freedom to seize your own opportunities or fix your own threats. Autonomy is more than simply giving more responsibility to the people. Autonomy is also about changing your organizational structure. Because if you face a lot of issues that were created by another department, and maybe by 2 or 3 different departments, then you can spend more time in meetings trying to align than doing your job, and you don't have autonomy. You're constantly facing problems that were created by another department. That's why, if you want this autonomy, a lot of organizations are changing from a functional organization where you have marketing, sales, production, to cross-functional organizations organized around a customer, around a brand, or around a region, for instance, whatever suits. And this is something that you need to build for yourself. But what is very important is to have not too much interdependence between departments. And we have been educated with Taylorism, where we thought we are thinking in functions instead of thinking in another completely different way of organizing ourselves. And I find that the best image of a cross-functional team comes from the Formula One. And I'm going to show you this great cross-functional team. So this pit stop was organized with a cross-functional team. In a traditional organization, you would have a lollipop department, a jacklift department, a tires department, a fuel department, and in the end, the boss that says, go ahead. And instead of having a pit stop of a couple of seconds, we would have a pit stop of 2 hours. So when I'm talking about autonomy, I'm not only talking about giving more responsibility to the people. That is, of course, important, but it might also mean changing the structure of the organization so that you can solve a maximum of your opportunities, seize your opportunities, or solve your issues yourself. Then the third criteria to have an empowered team is psychological safety. So there is a lot of research coming now that if you want a high-performing team, you need psychological safety. So you need trust. You need to be able to tell things to each other and not about each other. You need to be able to give feedback to each other, to encourage each other, to be afraid to take a little bit of personal risk for the greater good of the company and the team. So this high psychological safety has a huge impact on empowerment, but also on performance and impact and innovation. So particularly the ability to make mistakes. So we've done a lot of assessments, and what we notice is that if you feel very bad when you make a mistake, your agility decreases. So you have to be able to make mistakes, talk about it, to correct them, and of course, learning new skills and adapting yourself to new things is about learning new skills and is about making mistakes in the beginning. It's normal to make mistakes, and it's way more rapid and faster to learn by making mistakes than to try to analyze everything and avoid making mistakes before you take the first step. So that's very important as well. And then, of course, the last successful criteria for an empowered team is to have this reprogrammed leader that we talked about in the first habit. And that's why the foundation is really adopting these habits of thriving teams, reprogramming the leader, reprogramming the team members, and then you can start with empowerment. So what is the criteria that could be improved in your team? Is it clarity? Is it autonomy, psychological safety, or is it really this reprogrammed authentic leader? So let us know in the chat what is the most important criteria that you should work on with your team. Okay, I don't know if there are questions. Yeah, I feel adapted, but mostly the company and the management is not adapted. Yeah, I hear that a lot. And in fact, what we see is that leaders have been successful by a certain way of being, and they performed in slower times and got to the top of the organizations by a certain way of doing. They're very confident or very used to that way of being. And so for them, it's even harder to change because they have to let go of things that build their identity, that they're comfortable with, that build their ego and status. So it's very difficult for them to change and to let go of that, to learn new skills where they might not be comfortable at first, where they might make mistakes. And so we see that in a lot of organizations, but it doesn't mean that you can't change, because change can come from every layer in the organization. Of course, it is way more rapid if first the leaders transform, because then it will be way easier for the rest of the organization to transform. But still, we have seen cases where the change comes from beneath in the organization, and then the pressure is high on the top to transform as well. But I know it's not easy, but it's not, I would really not use that as an excuse to not changing yourself. Because if you're suffering from the consequences, you can start changing yourself, and that's the best way to change others. Changing yourself is the best way to change others. And if you're still not happy, then you can change company. And that will also be a signal for your organization. Because when too many people leave, when they don't manage to attract talent, they have to reinvent themselves. And so then the leadership might change. So you're contributing to the change. You might not be there anymore, but you're still contributing to the change. Okay. So once you thrive in fast and busy times, you have increased empowerment. Now you can start implementing the hybrid strategies. And really, it's very important to do it in this order, because a lot of these hybrid strategies will simply not work, or you won't be able to implement them because you don't have the other steps first. So it's really, there is an order there. So what are the hybrid team strategies? Well, the first one is, for a hybrid team to function, you need to have empowerment. And that's why they are so linked. If you don't have empowerment, if you don't have an empowered team, it will not work very well in the hybrid setting of the remote setting. Then the second thing to adopt is the hybrid communication. So what is hybrid communication? Well, hybrid communication is a combination of synchronous communication. So synchronous means at the same time. What we're doing is synchronous communication. A meeting is a synchronous communication, a call, or just seeing each other. With asynchronous communication, it means that you communicate, but somebody can read it later. An email is asynchronous communication, for instance. With uninterrupted work time, because you really need that if you want to do deep work, if you want to work on your problems, if you want to solve them, if you want to reinvent yourself. And when you're changing, you constantly need to reinvent yourself. With planned spontaneity. So in a hybrid setting, you don't meet your colleagues as much at a coffee machine, or you don't have all your senses anymore. You don't see things, you don't hear things. So you have to plan your spontaneous moments. It's very strange, but if you don't do that, you won't get there. So, and for instance, asynchronous communication, for a lot of companies, that's mainly emails today. So this is how it should be, but the reality for many is that we spend a lot of time in virtual meetings. We do some asynchronous communication, and that's mainly emails. We have little uninterrupted work time and almost no planned spontaneity, because work has become very transactional since we're working with virtual meetings. So we turn on the camera and we dive immediately into the subject, and we don't have this spontaneity anymore. So just to give you an example of asynchronous communication, you could do a meeting, something that you would typically do in a meeting, in an asynchronous communication. So one person could make a short video, for instance, about a topic, and then ask for the input of the team members. And that would replace a lot of hours of meetings that are unnecessary. So this is how you should work, and this is how a lot of organizations work. So what is your reality? Have you already adapted hybrid communication? Are you in between, or are you having too many meetings, emails, and chats that make it difficult? Okay. So I don't know if the rest of you noticed as well that there are more and more meetings when working remote, more so than you'd have in person, because it's so easy to click and send a team link. Yeah, that's true. And there is, in fact, the other day I was reading an article about a big Asian company where they noticed that they now have 30% more meetings than before COVID, and they have 20% less impact and productivity. So there are a lot of meetings that are there because, for instance, and that's the third aspect, there isn't visible work. And what is visible work? Visible work is we have to have this culture of transparency and documentation. So when you're working in hybrid mode, you have to have your processes described and available for everyone. You can avoid a lot of meetings also with project management tools. So when my colleagues are working on something, I can see it in the project management tool. I don't have to have a meeting to check What have you done? Where are we on this project? It's all visible in a project management tool. And the processes are described, they are available, a lot of documentation is there. The availability should also be visible. Now I'm doing a thinking time. You could put that in your calendar. Now I'm free for a quick call, or now I'm in a meeting. Then as leaders, I got a lot of walking into the office, to the coffee machine, just having spontaneous chats with people in the organization. I learned a lot from that, and I think they got a lot out of it as well. You could, for instance, make yourself available every week in a virtual room just for people to pop up and talk to you without any topic that are planned. That's also very important in a culture of transparency and documentation. And a good example, and you will be sent the presentation. GitLab is a company, a very successful company with more than 2,000 employees over the whole work. And they work exclusively remotely. And they have everything of their way of working that is described. So you don't need to have all these meetings to understand something. You can go to the handbook that is constantly adapted by a lot of people to check how you can do whatever needs to be done in that organization. This is especially useful for new employees. So that's very important to have this visible work. So how visible is work in your organization? Is there this culture of documentation, of processes, of showing what's available? Because we miss a lot of cues. We don't see as much when we're working from home. We don't hear as much. And that's very important to learn, to be connected to the culture, to the colleagues. And that's why you have, again, to plan that, and also to have this culture of transparency and documentation. Then the fourth element is, I've already said it, but unfortunately what we see is that with the virtual meetings, work has become very transactional. We don't have the planned spontaneity. We don't have the waiting before everyone is there in a meeting where we start chatting and laughing about something. And so we really have to work on the mood management and asking people how are they doing, having deeper conversations, checking on people. So it's very important to not only manage the tasks, the processes, but also the mood of your people. And there again, because it doesn't always happen spontaneously, you have to plan it. But if you don't do it, engagement will be low, people will feel bad, because we are social beings. And really, biologically, we don't function well if we don't have these social interactions. You will feel not as good if you isolate yourself. You might think you win a lot of time by not going into the traffic jam and working on your to-dos, but you might be stuck with a problem while chatting with somebody about something might really be the oil that needs to grease the motor to function well. And so managing the mood, checking how people are doing is essential in a hybrid setting. And then you have to choose what you do, because like I said, we are social beings. For instance, brainstorming, having creative ideas, getting to know each other. These are activities that we absolutely need to do from the office, or not the office, but at least in person, meeting regularly together to create this how do you say it, mortar between the bricks is essential. And that's why also a lot of organizations are starting also to redesign their office spaces, so that at the office, yes, you can still have a virtual meeting because you might still need to do that from the office, but you have also lots of space where that encourages the brainstorming, the relationships, the networking, the innovation. And then also very essential and a lot forgotten, you have to have a great onboarding strategy, especially for those young people, because when you start in an organization, when you started at the office, again, you saw a lot of interaction, you heard a lot of things, you saw the values maybe on the walls, and you learned a lot from just being around other people. When you're working from home, you don't have all these senses. So you have to pay extra attention to a great onboarding of the new people, so that they get to know other people within the team, outside of the team, the leaders, what are the processes, again, with very well documented work, so that they can find everything they need and understand all the processes in one place. That is very important, because what we've also seen is that working remotely or in hybrid setting increases the imposter syndrome. So a lot of people, they're doing their work, but they're thinking, I'm not sure I'm doing so great. Why did I hire me? So that's also very important. So those are the 3 steps. So first, you have to reprogram yourself and the leader for the fast and busy times. Once you are reprogrammed, then you can start increasing empowerment with the 4 success criteria: clarity, autonomy, psychological safety, and a reprogrammed leader. And then you can adopt the hybrid strategies. So these are the 3 steps to thrive in fast and busy times in a hybrid setting. So what is the step your team should work on? Is it the thriving in fast and busy times first? Is it increasing empowerment? Is it C, adopting hybrid work strategies? Or maybe it's D, none. You're already doing great, and that's fantastic. You can also contact me, because we could do then a podcast episode together to give more content to the other ones. So let me check. So A and C, yeah, okay. Yeah, and mentorship for onboarding new colleagues, also very, very important. And especially the young people, and they are lost. Imagine you've never worked in an organization, you don't know what the cues are, and that's a problem. That's a problem of young people starting remotely or barely going to the office. They are lost and they don't know what a good work habit is. In fact, they need to learn that. So a mentorship is also very nice. All right. And so I know it might seem a lot, but we really have to work also on building these processes. If you only constantly work on tasks, you will face so many issues that you will be in this rat race where you keep working, solving issues. You have to invest time to transform yourself, your team, your organization, your way of working. Fun fact, my boss and I have never met in person, and it works well. I am that generation stuck in between millennials and Gen Z. Okay. Digital onboarding is a valuable tool. Okay, thank you for that. So what I see, the biggest mistake, and if you know me, if you followed me, you know probably what I'm gonna say, but the biggest mistake is that people keep running all the time and don't stop enough. And then you get into this vicious circle where in fact you exhaust yourself because you're always too busy. And I know people, you ask them something and they will always, I'm too busy, I don't have time. But then you stay in this vicious circle. So it's about investing time to transform yourself and your team. And that is how you will get into a virtuous circle. So how can you start? Well, first of all, we're going to share with you at the end of the presentation two links because you can start by assessing yourself. So we have developed two assessments. One is how adapted are you to the fast and busy times? And the other one is how empowered is your team? So we will send you the links at the end of the presentation in the chat, but also by email. So you can start by assessing yourself. And then if you want to go further, well, of course, that is our specialty. So we have two courses that are certified by Solvay Brussels School. One that does exactly how to reprogram yourself for fast and busy times. And that is called Leading Authentically in Digital Times. If you want to enroll, it starts in May 2024. And we have one about how to increase empowerment and adopt these hybrid strategies. Not all, but we're giving a head start. That one starts in March 2024. And of course, you get a certificate from Solvay Brussels School with those programs. But if you want, we also make specialized, personalized programs for your team or your organization designed to transform busy leaders and their team. And so we're going to start with assessing how you're doing and then propose a blended programs. What is very, very important, if you want to change how you work, the usual way how people change is that they measure things, they look at the KPIs, the results, then they're changing what they're having, the services, the products, they work a lot on the doing, and they forget the being. Because like I said, if you missed the beginning of the presentation, a very important part is you need to change, to recondition yourself, because you have been conditioned for slower times. So it is way more impactful to start changing first your beliefs, your thoughts, your values, your emotions, your mindset, your sensations. And then once you start changing your beliefs, your way of being, you will automatically put different actions in place and have way better results. So that is a very important approach, and that is how we function and how we work. Also, our courses, should you be interested, are designed for busy people. They are blended with self-paced content, because if we want to change who you are, we have to work with micro content over a longer period of time. It's a combination of cases with very counterintuitive techniques. We transform at the level of being. It's based on the latest neuroscience and socio-technique. Remember when I talked about cross-functional teams, that's socio-technique. We measure your progress, and it's a mix of inspiration, coaching, workshops, assessments, and self-paced content. So some of the results, so we've seen increase in well-being at Nestlé and P&G, a mobility leadership team, and some of you are here. Performance increased with 9.2% in 3 months. So in the how adapted are you to the fast and busy times, we've already had more than 1,000 leaders and their teams going through the program, and 83% recommended to others. So here are some of the testimonials. It's a work that not only changes you at work, but also in your private life. And the goal is really to have more impact, meaning, and balance for you and your team. At the end, it's all about reaching the objectives that you want. These are some of our customers. So we work with a lot of different customers from different sectors.